All right, better late than never. It's Saturday, July 25th, 4:52 p.m. Eastern on the Yang Gang Roundtable, and we are fortunate enough to have, in addition to our regulars, Jeremy Fay and Ariel, Morgan Dawd, congressional candidate for Pennsylvania's 30th district. 30th?
No, 11th or 4th.
11th or 4th?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry for getting it wrong, but two,
No, it's
please
okay.
explain how that is.
Okay, so in Pennsylvania, I have to live in the district you want to represent.
Okay.
But I have whispers and rumblings from people in other districts that are like, hey, this might be a thing. You want to move here if you're going to opt to do that. So I could just insert myself rather than having to primary somebody. So there's an uncontested seat that could potentially pop up in the 4th district.
Okay.
So I could just move there for a year, make
Strategic.
sure I have myself. Yeah, I'm
I like
pragmatic.
That. Yeah. You have to be. I mean, we're dedicated to basic income, and it has to be a nonpartisan project. It has to be a pragmatic project, and we have to be willing to be flexible. And I'm so glad to have, I was just saying before we went live, one of the Republican congressional candidates who's running on a basic income platform, because there are not as many of you as there are Democrats. And you were saying, well, there are more of you than you think. And I said, yeah, that's good. We keep finding you and bringing you on the show and letting people know. So, so that's a good place to start, I think. So Jeremy is part of a project to I'm blanking on the word, a PAC. We have a PAC that Jeremy is working on specifically for pro basic income Republicans to support them. So he's got probably some interesting things to talk about with you. I don't know if you want to get the conversation started there, but that seems like a good place to me.
I learned from my first podcast interview, I'm not a very good public speaker. I had to take written notes before I start. But if you guys would like to lead the conversation, I'll participate in just Q&A,
Yeah, that's what we do. We have an open discussion, and we'll let the conversation take off, kind of like Joe Rogan. So just relax, and we'll keep it centered around basic income, electoral politics, and poverty. And the theory are always intertwined. So that's why we're all here. Yeah. So Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about that project? And maybe Morgan can comment on that, and you guys can start a dialogue. I'm sure there's stuff we can learn through this exchange.
I don't bite. I promise.
Yeah.
Right on, man. All right. So once again, my name is Jeremy. We've spoken very briefly before this conversation here, but yeah, the organization or the PAC, the Political Action Committee that I put together, is called Restoring American Families. We're still in the very beginning phases. So all of our FEC paperwork is filed. Like we're legit on the books. We just don't have a social media, platform or presence just yet. But what we're trying to do is number one, locate and identify pro UBI Republicans, libertarians, more independent type people, just people that really aren't self-identified as liberals or progressive, what have you. And the main goal of the project is to shift the Overton window of UBI to the center, so that it's not a democratic issue or a straight liberal position to take. That is a truly center capitalist, forward-thinking position to have. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what we're trying to do. I think also the candidates that we will identify, they will need a boost, making their online presence more well-known and accessible. And that's where we plan to come in and help.
Mm-hmm.
But that's us. That's us in a nutshell. You have described yourself as a progressive Republican. I'm just curious what that really means.
Well, okay, I put it in the terms that somebody on the left can understand, that I'm willing to be flexible on things and I'm willing to work with solutions. But the idea of the left owning the word progressive kind of doesn't fit with me at all as far as the words and how they matter, because I could describe myself as a progressive Republican. It doesn't mean that I'm like co-opting their term. I'm using just a word to describe that I'm trying to push my party forward, progress.
That's a
And
great point. Yeah.
like you can't just claim stake to something and say it's mine, it's mine. Like the English language is shared in our country. It has weight and meaning. You should be able to say what you want to say without being cast down. So I mean for me
Very
that
well
means
said.
like for me that means taking time to think about the issues and take them from a direct solution standpoint. For example, in my state there are 15,000 homeless people, and that's rising very, very quickly. There's also a wealth discrepancy because we've pumped in 25% more into social services and welfare spending, which has increased the gap of wealth from the middle class rung in our state. We're 39th poorest in the United States, FY, for context. I'm wanting to flip that and turn it into at least 15th. But we dump like almost 500 million a year into social services, welfare, TANF, HUD, housing, paying the social workers to do it. If we were to actually cut that and reduce that spending, and unfortunately it would result in layoffs and everything like that, but we have to shrink the government's reach, because if you keep expanding the government on a local level, it becomes a zero-sum game, because pretty soon you're going to start hiring the people that are actually homeless to take care of the homeless. The bureaucratic like monopoly is just getting out of control. There's no there. We also have earmarked pages in our budget for PA that are sent to special interest groups and everything like that, because we have to invest in that, because they're the only things paying for the state.
Uh,
Where we could be diverting that money to like a non-centralized 23 square miles, meaning it could be different towns, different sections of the state, but have a decentralized, almost like Hornsdale Battery Farm, if you know what that is, in Southeast Australia, where
uh,
they export and stabilize the grid, and they can export energy and make money.
Yeah,
We
that's what
can
Tesla was
do
involved
that
with, right?
and in them. Yeah, exactly. And then
yeah,
we have a company in Texas called Icon that can 3D print a proprietary resin and mortar mixed house that's almost 600 square feet for under $4,000 or $5,000, and that was in 2018. And they could do it in 12 hours. You could put
mm,
that and make it so there's an actuating solar panel and battery pack on each house. And then when it's winter, you just make sure the solar panel is vertical so the snow doesn't cover it. The UV light bouncing off the snow is actually more volatile than regular light. You would maybe making more energy and storing more energy and exporting it to other states or counties, and raking in cash for the budget, and then you can turn that into a basic income after you downsize the welfare state in this in the state itself.
yeah. Morgan, I'd like to speak to what you just said about like getting people who are in dire straits and then making them part of the bureaucracy who help people who are in dire straits. When I was on unemployment and I got a job offer from to join the unemployment office as
Yep.
like part of IT, and I'm like, this is just so ridiculous. And it reminds me, there's this snake, it's called the Ouroboros, and
Yep.
it's basically eating its own tail.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing to ourselves financially. It's like it's like we're cannibalizing on all these things, which does not need to happen.
Yeah, so it sounds
Like,
to me, Morgan, like so with the when tackling homelessness, you would also alleviate the burden of green energy and the welfare state within your community, right? And so
yeah.
it's a three-pronged approach: homelessness, green energy, welfare reform.
And then the fourth part of it is with the green energy, it would be energy exports, which would increase the budget, and then you can cyclically throw that back into the the contract that I would possibly formulate with Tesla and Icon to build these homes communities to subsidize the homeless problem, because we're 460 million or upwards of 120 million once. Now that 460 million is yearly repeating on tax dollars budget. Like the taxpayers are paying that amount just to help the homeless community and the welfare state as it is. You could end the homeless community problem and retroactively just add a house if somebody were to go and apply for. And this is something I also want to bring up is I'm going to cycle back, but I want to open up frontier law again inside the state, which means that if there's federal granted land that they already own, they can give that as a place to print the house, and it would already be self-sustaining because most of the stuff out there is well water, and solar would provide the electricity. And by 2021, we're going to have Starlink as a standard thing in the US. So like the technology trend is there, but everybody's burying their head in the sand.
So what would you need to do? Like what kind of organizing of people would you need to recruit to make stuff like this happen? So like who's like funding and building, I guess?
Well, when you're doing a 3D printed houses, I can share the video with you after this so you get an idea of how, or you can look it up yourself, it's on YouTube. But you only need flat surface, you pour concrete foundation, you bring in the joist. It's a joist system that tracks back and forth and then moves in three-dimensional space and just lays down layers of it. They printed one house in 24 hours that was about 650 square feet in Texas, but that was at a quarter speed. So they could do it in 12 to 6 hours. Like if they rush the machine, you can print an entire 6-block neighborhood in a week. And they're doing it in Venezuela right now to alleviate the housing crisis Venezuela is having because of their overly socialist policies.
That's like really incredible though. But I mean, it gets rid of the excuse about not having enough people, right? You know, to build houses that you can't build them quick enough. Like it actually seems like it's streamlining the process and automating something that actually might need to be done just to keep up.
Well, if you look it up, there's a sun garden industry in the CCP. I'm very against CCP as far as things, but they're printing entire apartment complexes. They're printing entire mansions just out of a concrete mortar mixture and a 3D extruder.
So they can do multiple floors with printing?
Yep.
That's incredible.
So
oh my gosh.
You put the foundation, the footprint layer for the walls, and then you lay another foundation on top of it, footprint layer for the walls. It's so strong it just stacks on itself. So that's one way of doing it. Another one is that what inspired this technology, by the way, is space exploration. I'm very for another space race. We need that. NASA made a contract like we need people to figure out how to make domiciles on Mars that are very rigid and super lightweight and can be made very quickly. And somebody's like, well, let's just apply 3D printing and figure out a way to do that. And from that technology, we now can build houses and at a fourth of the cost of what it takes to manage a property that HUD has taken over and is using tax dollars and man hours to manage and look over. They can make it a nearly indestructible like living structure that the government can control and the person can lease to own out of like a tax rate or something. And then that would get rid of the wealth disparity and inequities because the person wouldn't actually own property, be it maybe a little bit cookie cutter to the rest of the neighborhood, but it would allow them with a UBI, a lessened tax burden from the welfare state, like imposing its will on the people. You'd end up with.
But that's just the baseline. It's like we can only evolve from there, right? Yeah. It might be cookie cutter now, but just imagine the evolution of that.
Well, they already have the company Icon now makes it so you can use an iPad to draw the dimensions of where you want your walls and how you want it. And then the AI software will recommend, well, this is a little too skinny for a hallway. Let's bump it out to here. Like we already have that tech in place. Like that you can have unique houses if you're a homeless person. Be like, you go and apply for a frontier land grant. You're like, I know this is undeveloped area. And then they can say, all right, fine, here's the grant. Then you have the small, like $600, $700 UBI to help you get tools, flatten out the area. And then Icon comes in because they've got or even Icon could do this. They can bulldoze it. And let's say it's a total cost of a house, $15,000. Well, that's pretty much on par with a trailer in PA. Like it's between $7,000 and $15,000. When you subsidize that and zero it out so it's a permanent structure and not something as flimsy as a trailer park thing, which most people are stuck in now, because the bottom rung are at 24,000 a year and the middle class are at 54. There's a $30,000 gap in wages. That's huge.
I actually heard that, like, trailer parks is where the money's at these days because everyone's so broke that that's where they need to move to, and
it's a predatory market.
It is. It's crazy. I wonder if
there'll be
that's
a
from the
bubble on
war
that
going-
eventually, but I mean, if you go in with the logic, well, the investor class are going to be protected when the bubble bursts, I may as well, then it's a good investment.
Yeah, Warren Buffett is a major investor in many trailer parks.
I did not know that. That's actually not very surprising, but I didn't know that.
We're here to learn.
See, that's the other thing, and I'm trying to show people, like on the Republican side, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to voice your opinions. The reason why people say the silent majority exists is because most conservatives are just that. They're conservative in their values and views. They don't share them with others because they respectfully just want to use their vote the way they want to use it.
Well, right on. Let's try to pry that book open a little bit more than there for, in terms of conservative values. I guess topic of abortion. Where do you fall on that debate?
Pro-life, but with the way that technology is going, Philadelphia Children's Hospital just took from in utero, like they transplanted a lamb into an artificial womb, had it grow to full term, walked around for weeks, it was completely healthy, could have lived a full life. They killed it for science. Just gonna put that out there. I understand, Faye, you have to do a post-mortem on something that was artificially grown. That's just how it is. We'd rather have it done on like a lamb than a human being, for sure. But I want to have our country, or at least parts of my state's investment firms, because we have entire investment like branches of our government. We have way too many branches in our government for state government. At least push some money into developing that so they could start human trials sooner than 4 or 5 years, just which their projections are. If you, and I don't pretend to know what women want, I only know that as a factor, and this isn't a moral stance, okay? It's not a religious stance, but every death at the hands of abortion is a lost potentiality for a problem solved.
I think what's important though is to combine stuff like this with the UBI, because women who get pregnant might abort because they don't have the finances. To even keep their baby alive when it is born, and a lot of those programs disappear once the baby has appeared, and that's also part of the problem. And then you got all these predatory businesses that like people were farming babies essentially to make money, in other countries, other countries, they would actually use their children and cut off a part of their limb so that they would earn more by begging, right? That, like, this is true story. That's messed up, but like that by having children deformed, it helps them, which is part of a problem. That's not our country. I mean, it could be our country. I don't know.
Oh, we got to stop means
I don't
testing.
think so.
It's the means testing. So I'll give you a little. I'll give a little contextual history on the welfare state as a whole. It was meant to be originally a democratic policy to give Spanish American war survivors and slavery survivors, people who were emancipated or adopted into the American culture, a refund as far as reparations. And then it got overly bloated with bureaucracy and means testing, because it used to be just $100 unbridled. Here you go. It turned into the welfare state as we know it now, which incentivizes people being poor. That needs to stop. And the other bill that the Democrats, then Dixiecrats, had put up was the welfare state versus the Republican UBI. And a lot of people think that it's a Democratic issue. If you're arguing UBI, it's actually a Republican issue because that was a fiscal conservative view of circumventing the tax system and the bloat. So I respect that you have an idea of what a social or what the countries you're just potentially describing, if I'm not mistaken, have overly reaching social welfare programs or incentives to do horrible things, and that's what a welfare state, if it's overly developed, will eventually do. It'll lead either to full-blown socialism or disincentivizing work entirely. So
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that you
but
have.
now we have automation.
Oh, go on.
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say I love that you have, an ideology that, even though it's not mine, it squares. It works consistently within its own rules and framework. It's not a hypocrisy. It's not just some arbitrary, collection of beliefs that aren't well explored. You have a real systemic ideological view, and it is rooted in this true idea, I think, that the left does not have a monopoly on populism, and there is such a thing as right populism, and you're exploring it. I think it's great. I mean, that's the way I see it. Do you see it differently? Sorry, I meant progressivism. I used the completely wrong word, dude.
I would but
also populism. I mean, they're both
there's nothing
key.
wrong
Yeah,
with
there's nothing wrong with
populism.
populism, but I mean, right
There's
progressivism exists too,
there's
and right populism. Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with populism so long as it doesn't control the narrative. You need populist ideas to conflict with each other so you come to a consensus in the middle. You can't have fifth column right and fifth column left arguing with each other like we have now. You have to have the four middle columns working together. And that's what our frameworkers in the Federalist Papers tried to describe. Our system is built for gridlock for a reason.
Yeah.
It's so we argue. If we start insulating ourselves within our own communities, we don't have that. We're supposed to bicker and fight as civil as, like, not fight, like don't throw punches, but verbally fight for what you believe in. And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to voice yourself in a peaceful way, or at least a discussion like this, then you need to understand why you're not doing that. And populism is like, there's three actual populist movements in the US: let the government burn, right and left. Like, this is really where it is. And it's almost like 70% of the people don't vote because they're disincentivized to. We have the welfare, like, again, I'm going to go back to the welfare state. It either forces people into slave wages, meaning they're just trying to get by and pay their bills and not go above their means testing. So now they're on this treadmill where they can't take a day off to vote. Or they're just, fuck, the system is too corrupt because it just looks so insurmountably big. And all it takes is really somebody with a pen and enough backing to change that in just a moment. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Well, part of it is we need to communicate outside of our echo chambers. We need to expand even to other countries and see what they've done and take some of their templates. I mean, we want autonomy. I think that's but we also want to be accepted.
What countries?
Well,
you just had people from UK on here yesterday.
Well, yeah, and we've had people from Canada as well who are doing their own UBI movements. We might even have someone from Kenya soon. So like, we are getting in touch with people at a bigger scale. Like, this isn't just America right now, but we have to start somewhere, and that's grassroots, and that's what we're doing. And I mean, we're only growing, and we all just want to see a better country.
And also, like, for the pro-life stance of like Republicans, well, life should also include quality of life, not just quantity of life, and not just being out of the womb. And quality of life, includes things like your happiness level, your mental health. It's not just how much are you producing for our gross domestic product. And that's what a UBI will fall into. A UBI is the most pro-life policy when it comes to quality of life, as well as how long you're going to live and all that stuff. So we should look for more pro quality of life people, and not just, oh, you can live your life, but you can suffer in like pain, anguish, disappointment, and scarcity, but at least you came out of the womb, you know.
Well, okay. I will point out that the difficulty of living will always be a constant. You can't argue that. What you can argue is equality for everyone equals inequity. You have to have equity to have equality. That's why when you do an investment plan like me, trying to divest from being in the homeless welfare state, like renewal that we have to pay into with taxes, we could drop 120 million out of the state budget, end it all, and then start making up money and paying for itself in 14 months. Like that's capitalism at work in the right way. It's a humane way of doing it. What
Right.
the people arguing, like, I'm not saying any of you are like this, but the people arguing that we need to go to a communist or Marxist kind of like society, I get that. I understand where you're coming from. The critique of Marx on capitalism was correct. The prescription was horrible. It was absolutely.
It's a fair case.
Yeah, that's fine. We're just
UBI
talking.
is the solve for that. It can only
Right.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
late stage
Yeah.
capitalism.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, we
we're
can
all on
agree
the
on
same
that.
page. I'm just reiterating that, like, people will on my side, because I'm saying let's just end homelessness and have the government take care of it, will scream socialism while I'm yelling divestment. And then people on the left side will see this as a move for good social equality. I just have to explain it to my side, not so much the left, because the left, from what I understand, is more willing to cancel me at a whim because I'm just run with the Republican tag, which is something that I've had my entire life. Like, it's
Well,
just.
we're working on it. We're trying to
I
stop
know,
that.
I know.
That
We're
shit,
coming to the table.
We're
Well,
trying
there's
to
a
stop
reason
that shit.
why you got so many former Trump people to come on his side, and a lot of them have kind of seen the light. I think Trump was just a cry for help for like a lot of people economically suffering. And I think it was just like you got the pill over here, and it's just going to be the same shit. But Trump wasn't like the good pill. He was
It
just
was
like
a new flavor.
right.
They didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
He was like he was a dice roll. People were so upset.
It's
They're
like
like, let's roll the dice.
You can take this garbage, or you can take what's behind door number 2. You don't know what's behind door number 2, but you don't want garbage. But maybe what's behind door number 2 is more garbage. So it was just like they just wanted to see what was behind door number 2 because they had it with the devil that they knew. But it was like, and that's where we got Trump, I think. And then Yang came in, and he knows that.
Well, yeah, Yang echoes a new like column of populism in my opinion, which is the center populist ideology. We have the nihilist type, the left and the right, and now we have center, and Yang's echoing that. And I think it's woken up a lot of Republican conservatives that have more liberal views, like myself. I understand that my views are liberal. I just like use the word progressive to try to describe where I stand.
We're very anti-identitarian here.
Yeah. Go against
okay, I get that, but I can identify myself.
I'm just trying to abate your
not
anxieties.
to.
I understand what you're saying.
Right.
Oh, I'm not. I know.
Yeah.
I know. But
Like,
I have no
we're not like
anxiety about.
I'm not
espousing who I
presuming
am.
these
Yeah, I think like judge a person by the content of their character should also refer to whatever political party is a person is. Well, maybe like less that, but like just don't judge people instantaneously with labels. I think our mind likes to put things into groups or little boxes, but it's if there was ever a time to think outside the box, it's now. And we're gonna need all the people we can get to notice. Just don't just kind of step back, put your emotions in check, and just look at everything from like the point of zoomed out, like a rocket ship, like a satellite observing Earth instead of like being on it. It's like look at like the dynamics happening between everything rather
the
than
macro versus the micro.
right rather than the zone. And I think that Andrew Yang was really that was his forte.
Yeah, it like I had been studying UBI years before Yang had come along because it just made sense to me. I mean, I had kind of an epiphany where I'd become homeless early in my life, I'd paid in, I'd gone to school, I had done everything I was supposed to. So I took, and I remember sitting in the shelter because I got to that point because I had broken my ankle at that point. I couldn't pay the bills, and I had gotten angry and resentful of the system. So I started reading a lot of books on economics and theology or philosophy. One of them was Chaos in Community, which caught my attention. And I mean, at that point, it had been out for a long time, obviously. But that set me down the track of looking into what would directly economically affect the bottom 90%, if you were to the bottom 85. And in a positive way. And UBI was the obvious answer because it was the welfare state without all the bureaucratic taxation. But most of the, if you know anything about welfare as far as ratios of dollars given versus used, we currently give $1 to every almost $7 used. If we got rid of all the bloat in the middle, we could just give the person $7 because we live in an age of technology that can do that instantly.
Yeah, it's and we're enriching these bureaucrats. You know, everybody likes to speak out against like, oh, the corporations, but like the bureaucrats are just as
no, they're the enablers.
Right, just as enabling as the corporations are. It's like you don't. It's like pure like 100% late stage capitalism is like give all the power to the corporations and the private sector and let them take care of it. But on the other side, it's like, no, give all the like communism and stuff, give all the power to the bureaucrats and let them take care of it.
They're
it's
more
like,
wasteful.
No, right, they're more wasteful. So what we have right now, unfortunately, I think, is the worst of both worlds, where if you're not in the hands of a powerful corporation, you're in the hands of like a powerful bureaucrat. Now a UBI is like, okay, we don't want our fate in the pure like private sector kind of philosophy and in the pure like communistic bureaucrat thing. We want it in our hands, and everybody gets a slice of this, and what they do with it to like improve
totally
themselves is up to them. Right, exactly. We don't start at zero, because in a pure free market, what have you, someone starts at zero and somebody starts at 1 million. Well, that's not like pure, that's not fair. And people are just saying it's fair. No, people have inherited wealth. People have like maybe no physical disability. They were born with something. So just saying everybody starts at their default setting is fair is bullshit.
I get it. What you're arguing there is equality should be a thing, but you have to enable it with equity. And when you give equity freely as a capital refund as through the tax system that we already use, you could free up more money. And this is another point I want to make, is if you get rid of the bureaucratic welfare state in just one state, let's say we just do it for my district. Let's say I win 11th or 4th, whatever. If you were to actually say, okay, this district, no more welfare, we're doing a UBI, we could do a grand scale like experiment. And if it turns out horribly in the first 6 weeks, we could just turn it back on and then figure out what went wrong within that small study window. We could watch the observed effects of just cutting the welfare state and people having, like, we could put furlough the
scientific method.
That's
and
great.
then just put it back if it's not worked, and then we can figure out what we could tweak to make it work even better the next time around.
Yeah, like that's like playing a video game. Like when you lose and you know you fell into that pit, it's like, okay, I need to jump further. I mean,
or delay my double jump until I'm like falling down.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we should do with politics. Instead, we have all this dogma and ideology coming from both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If my technocratic friends were here, my friends who want to defend the welfare state, and I think, Ariel, what you were actually identifying as, giving bureaucrats power is a technocracy rather than communism. But, communism involves
They're
some
pretty
bureaucracy
close.
too. Well, no, but I mean, that's a whole side debate. But yeah.
I'm sorry, you first.
God, you know what? What were we talking about?
The bureaucracy of the welfare state, as far as.
Oh, right. So if my technocratic friends were here to defend the welfare state, they would say, "Oh no, yes, you say it would be fun to do a 6-week trial. It would be good for the good of science and the nation, but are you going to be the one to tell that welfare recipient with 8 kids that her food stamps are shut off?" And that's usually where like the debate ends. But the thing is, they never really give you the chance to stand up, look them in the eye, and go, "Yeah, absolutely, I will go. Let's fucking go right now. They'll be so much happier to have that money in cash, you doofus. Don't give me this shit, right?"
It will. It's
I
something
probably
along
shouldn't
that
just break
lines.
off into a bunch of curses for no reason.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like, I get what you're saying, but like to your technocratic friends, I would say that, well, if you're arguing uh bureaucracy and paying people, sure, but that lines up when you get enough bureaucrats into it. It's almost to the almost to the communist value of each to his own and the effort of his value. Like that's very that doesn't allow for a free market where, like, let's say for example, right now, all the movie theaters are closing down. I'm looking to buy a property and make a drive-in. Like, there's an open market on drive-ins where I can make tons of cash. Now, what that is an exploitation of a lost market that we've lost. The same thing can apply to the taxes. That's a market that's been lost because it goes into another scape. You don't know where it's being used. It's being slush around for special interests. Bureaucrats are implicitly human. They implicitly put themselves first. We're cynical people. So, I mean,
Well,
that's my.
what you're talking about is just the evolution of man, right? Like, okay, so we want to be healthier by not interacting so close all the time. So let's not waste the space. We're going to revamp it and, evolve it. Because I mean, what I noticed with buildings in Portland, Oregon, was there was one business there, and soon enough there's a replacement business. It felt like I was looking at the stock market screen where it keeps flipping, right? Like each of these different buildings are changing, right?
My mother
That's
lives near
because
Portland.
we evolve.
I've seen what you're talking about too, where like one shop pops up, and then the next week, because it can't make ends meet because there's so many taxes in place for just opening your business, it closes down. And then the next one comes in, and it's almost like the investors that are allowing them to move into that space know what's happening, and they understand it, and they're just umbrellaed by it.
That sounds like a red flag to me, actually. Like, it shouldn't be that. Like, wait a minute, guys.
I don't understand why, like, they, instead of taxing the businesses, they don't provide starting businesses with tax credits. Provide the tax credits until someone can get on their feet and then tax them. Like,
yeah, what they do, that's called a TIF. That definitely does exist in some like new developments. It's like when you see a new shopping mall get put into like a new location, it's usually under a TIF where they don't have to pay state or local taxes for.
Well, they don't have to pay, or do they?
Yeah, they don't. So, for
don't.
example, Elon Musk just secured a factory site in Texas, Houston. The Texas government has lower corporate taxes and also gives major tax breaks to companies that are doing green energy initiatives. So instead of Elon having to pay like X amount of property taxes upon purchase, those are deferred until he makes a profit.
Well,
so what happened?
Is it like a tax? Is it a sub? It's a tax break, but is it like a subsidy?
Subsidy come after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not exactly.
Okay. So it's not that, but a subsidy is basically like a tax refund, or not even a refund, just being given money.
Right. Yeah. A TIF is really a tax deferral. So you're given like a grace period for a certain amount of time where you don't have to pay these certain taxes. But generally, that is only for, at least in my experience and my knowledge, only for new developments. Something similar was available for small businesses in like existing retail locations. It could be pretty powerful potentially.
Like a subsidy. If you're one, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jeremy.
I would say, like, just like Yang talked about all the time. You look around, and you drive through any town, anywhere in America, you're going to see these shopping malls, these shopping plazas. where half the fucking shops are empty. Well, I mean, it's some kind of tax deferral or TIF type incentive to put something in these buildings. Probably would be a decent idea.
Yeah, like what Texas does is they don't do anything until you're profitable. They don't start taxing you until you're profitable, because they know if they tax you before, then your business can go under. The development of the free market for your employees can go under. They lose their jobs. They understand that, and that's why a lot of people are fleeing California's business practices and Oregon's business practices, in Washington, even like basically the entire West Coast, to go to Texas and put their businesses there, because Texas has lowered their business incentives for being taxed up front significantly,
Mm.
which is developing their economy rapidly. It's like, I think, it's the third largest economy now, and it's almost about to
Yeah,
be
like I honestly think that, like, if you do something like that, you should get people should be getting subsidies until they're like, what's the word, they've got like a customer base or some momentum, and then once like they start getting that momentum, then they should be taxed, because it's like initial investment, because it's like you don't make your kids work when they're like 5, 6, 7 years old, because they're just, it's like you invest in them, and then after you invested into a person, then you expect that person to do something with that. You don't take from them when they're just getting started. I mean,
Yeah, no.
it should be common sense.
No, I think that the subsidy would exist as a UBI given to all citizens. So if you're
Exactly.
if your market base has additional expendable income, you wouldn't necessarily need to give a direct subsidy to said businesses. Which I could see some corruption and some issues with giving a straight subsidy to businesses. I mean, like Solyndra is a great example. I think that's where an example of government subsidies where didn't quite work out so well, and probably could have been handled better than what they did.
So, okay, I have a question about all this. How does this apply to shell companies for dirty money?
Dark money? In what way?
Yeah.
We have in our state's budget books, at least PA, earmarked special interest stuff in the budget. Like it's right there. We have a 3-part act that we want to enable on the state that would include would include balanced budget without tax hikes. So we currently have Governor Wolf proposing more tax hikes on the lower and middle class. And then we also have a 4.5% wealth tax, which incentivizes the heretical or not heretical, generational wealth to leave the state at rapid rates. People in my age group from 35 upwards, or 30 upwards, are leaving the state in record numbers, and people that are like 18 to 25 are moving in, but they're only getting paid the minimum wage. The problem with having everywhere have a 15, I'm going to get into it here, but if everybody had a $15 minimum wage, most employers wouldn't be able to hire young staff. Like part of having development as a young adult, like age is 18 or 16 in some cases, because people hire under the table, is being able to struggle and understand what's good for you, and then advocate on behalf of yourself of what you want for a wage. We currently, if we all go to a $15 minimum wage, that will kill tons of small businesses. It'll raise taxes. It'll make it so the federal government has even more reach into what your pocket is. So
I mean, they raised it in Seattle, and a lot of these concerns I don't think actually popped up. But I could be wrong. I didn't. I just feel like Seattle, Washington tried this, and it actually didn't really harm the city like everyone predicted it would.
It shut down a lot of businesses, actually.
It did? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I guess I didn't do follow up on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand like everybody's want for a higher minimum wage. Yes, but what our problem is with currency as far as wages go is because we're on the fiat petrol dollar. We should be moving to something like the kilowatt hour dollar, which is how much green energy can we create export and sequester carbon with. Now that's something everyone can get behind, because kilowatts per hour is a measurable metric off of the grid. And if you have a really green state, you should have a really efficient grid, and that should relate to the dollar value. And if we don't do that, as a whole country, then we're gonna there's countries like Sweden and the Netherlands that are looking at the kilowatt hour right now as a dollar backer. It would actually grow the value of the penny by 60%. That's one of the policies me and a few other people are working on. We're trying to figure out how to draft the bill correctly so it appeals to everybody. It's really hard. I have like 3 economists talking about it and a couple green energy advocates like going through it. We're working
We
on
definitely
assessing
need
the
more
math.
green energy for sure. Like this whole oil war would end, right? Like we wouldn't be trying to invade people's territory. We could be sharing our resources instead of hoarding them or causing damage to the environment. You know, like I think that's important. But also just teaching people how to do this on their own, I think, is also important, because we are autonomous beings. It's just we can't invest in ourselves if we got nothing to even feed ourselves with, you know. So
I get that. Does anybody have any questions? Because I'm at a loss of what to speak about. I've kind of gone over like
Well-
what I want to do to the state short term.
So, well, Andrew Yang want to get rid of the penny, but you want to raise it. Oh, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I know, but the penny is the baseline value of all our currency, 1 cent.
Oh, okay,
It's
right.
60%.
You had mentioned-
all the other stuff goes up 60%.
Okay, right, yeah.
Morgan, you'd mentioned there are more Republican UBI advocates and UBI hopefuls for Congress than we might know. Could you talk about some of the others you know of?
Well, I mean, as far as a general feeling, and the people I've talked to on the Republican end of it, even conservatives are like, okay, well, so what's the conservative case for it? Like, why would I agree to this socialist policy? I'm like, you already are with your tax system. Like, you're already paying into the welfare state, which is the most bureaucratic socialist policy we have in America. And then I'm not like anti-socialism, mind you. I'm just anti-overreach as far as bureaucracy, which turns into socialism. It's a very, very lockstep march towards that.
Yeah, I think you're making great points. It's unfortunate that you feel the justifiable need to like reflexively defend them and say, you know, I'm not going to the extreme here, even though this is a good point. It just really slows down like the speed at which you can communicate, because in this extremely hostile political climate, you have
I get it.
have to build this sort of defensive weave into your rhetoric. And like, I mean, I really agree with what you're saying, and I just wish we could fix the climate so you didn't have to say it in this way, because it's
not
yeah.
even that. I don't even approach it defensively. I'll say what I want to say to like a Republican. Like,
yeah, I know you will. I know you will.
Like, I'm not afraid of exercising my freedom of speech. If someone disagrees with me, I'll say, hey, sit down. I'll educate you why. Like,
I'm not. I'm saying, you know, I'm not. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're absolutely speaking your mind. You absolutely have the courage of your convictions. I'm saying that you've been unfortunately entrained on these common arguments that you just like, you know, you have to field, and it's just such a non-communicative political environment we have. You know, you're saying like, of course I don't, this doesn't make me a socialist, or like, I'm not fully on, this doesn't mean I'm completely against socialism, you know, like, and that's not even what we're talking about. Like, you don't, it's unfortunate we have to argue from this defensive framework sometimes, you know. It's why I say like, I'm very anti-identitarian, we're very anti-sectarian in this show. And like the way I think of myself politically, identity wise right now, is I was a Democrat for my whole life. I'm still a registered Democrat because tactically it's where, you know, I'm in New York State. It's what I can do tactically, and it's the people I know, and it's the system, the levers of power I know how to pull better. Totally cynical view, you know. And the reason, and I used to be, the reason I was Democrat in the past was, you know, well, now the way I see it, I was Democrat in the past because I went to college, I was indoctrinated into that worldview. And you know, and also my mom was that, you know, it's what I grew up with.
yes.
But now we're all grappling with sort of reconciling some new, so for some people challenging beliefs and that we must, or challenging issues that cause people to sort of do logical cartwheels to make their beliefs
Mental
unchanged.
gymnastics.
Yeah, mental gymnastics is the term I'm trying to come up with. So the solution really is that so many of us have the right idea, but are just not willing to let go of the fact that the framework with which we've invested so much of our lives just wasn't perfect,
Yeah.
But if we can all just do that, then we'll really be able to move forward. Anyway, that's the point.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
think-
get it.
I was saying a good example of that was yesterday with Bernie Sanders, talking shit on Elon Musk. Elon Musk sent out that first tweet saying that he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe in.
Got
and
ratioed so hard.
Yeah, but Bernie Sanders 9 fucking hours later doesn't take the time
Jeez.
to look at the 3 or
whole
4
thing.
tweets. Instead, calls him out over just something that he completely really didn't even fucking say. But that's a progressive
and that's
left today.
why people weave into their rhetoric. I do it too. People weave into their rhetoric, like, remember that just because I have deviated like even one iota from the lockstep dogmatic position of the right or left, that doesn't mean that I am extremely to the position of the other, or that I am, that I am this boogeyman you've been made to fear. We have to keep weaving that little defense into our rhetoric to convince anyone of our ideas at all, because there are all these points at which we've been trained to stop listening and become hostile. It's a terrible political culture we have.
It's a strange thing when I talk to a conservative about my futuristic approach to like doing away with abortion long term. Like the short term is we have both, and then we perfect the technology, and now abortions aren't even needed. We just put up like a department of adoption or something like that for families that can't produce kids. Like
it's
that,
key that
that's
we just table that until we get everybody enough money to make sure that people aren't having abortions because they can't afford to. Then we can talk about other stuff. I feel like it's just a strategic snafu to actually talk about that. I feel like we should just agree, be like, no, let's just table that until we stop being killed.
I think the powers that be are like feeding off everybody's like hostility and negativity and wait, are you pointing at something there?
Faye had her hand up.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry.
Ariel can talk. I'll go next.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Right. Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Yeah. So the powers that be are feeding off all of these, all of this extremism, and it's like people are programmed like Pavlov's dogs to like salivate, but instead of the bell being rung and people salivating, it's just like one thing that you're not lockstep on, and people are beating their chests like monkeys and ready to throw their what. it's like it's a culture that we gotta it's not we can't go into the future with this. I don't know what the answer is, but I talked to someone who studied neuroscience, and we're on the brink, but yeah, go ahead.
Think like group think. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to chime in about the whole abortion thing, since I'm a female. I don't know, it might give me a little say in this, right?
Absolutely.
So realistically, I would not want a child in this environment that we live in our country right now, right? It's, for me, I don't think my child would have very bright future. Okay. So, don't get me wrong. I take my protections to not get pregnant, but accidents happen. And for me, I'm like, to a capacity, I'm like, if it's within an early enough time, I would get an abortion because I don't want to raise a child in this environment. But then, as you guys were talking, the thoughts that went through my head were, well, if the baby was taken out of me and like put in a fake womb where it's not destroying my body, I think I'd totally be behind that. And if someone else like was gonna raise that baby who actually had money to support it, like I'd be okay with this, right? And like, but with the whole, like, before that statement about an artificial womb, I was very like, yeah, abortion's like not a bad idea, you know, because I don't want to cause quality of life to be really shitty for a child of mine when I can barely afford myself, right? Like I'm struggling and all my friends and family are struggling. Nobody's going to really be able to help me with that baby right now because they're working 10 to 12 hours to pay the rent. Okay. So like, I'm not wanting that, but I think the artificial womb would have to have
No,
UBI
absolutely.
because then I would have faith.
Because 70,
Yeah.
70
I would have faith that baby could be taken
and
care of.
78% of all abortions would never happen if there was a UBI in place in the first place. That's a staggering amount. Do you know how many cases of American eugenics we do a year? And I'm calling it that because that's what it was based out of. Okay, I'm just, I don't agree with it. I have a little history
look,
on my family trees. I have
I get it,
Jewish
but
family in that.
we have to work together. So you
Oh,
may
yeah,
want
I'm
to
totally
use
for that.
less divisive language. I don't know. Maybe
I-
you know, like you're not offending me, but in this
I'm-
climate of hostility, like it might be wise to not drop the eugenics line all the time. I don't know.
No, I'm not going to curb down my language. I'm sorry.
Not hey, absolutely. I'm not censoring you. I'm just saying like maybe we would have more success if you use different language. But if I have not swayed you, then I have not swayed you. I respect that. But yeah, let's talk about what you're talking about.
I'm with abortion. It came from that lineage of science that came out of Germany, World War II. It was practiced before that incorrectly, and then the Germans perfected it on the Jews. I have Jewish family. My great grandmother was in Auschwitz. She's a survivor. She had the tat and everything. She died a few years back. Now,
Jewish myself.
yeah, so it's not a great thing, in my opinion, that we allow this to continue. We kill 300,000 potential Americans a year. New York State, just adjacent to me, has a negative black birth rate now because of it. Right? Like it's astonishing if you look at the actual statistics of what's going on. It's really bad. But if we had this technology in place, it could be really good, and then combined with the UBI, it could be even better. If we just made the option available, because I'm not speaking out against you, Faye. You're not a bad person for having your beliefs and your stances. Okay, you have your right as a woman to say, this is my choice. I want autonomy. I get that, but it should be also if there is an option to be like, well, they're gonna have to like perform a surgery on me anyways. I could potentially just put the kid up for adoption and like let the person name it when it comes to birth age, if you would.
Yeah, it's, I like,
Well,
well, if I'd like to say,
so
if I could jump just real quick. I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the show before, but I'm adopted. As I have no idea who my parents are, and the parents who raised me are not my biological parents. And it's it's definitely a very viable option. I would definitely encourage anyone to pursue that path if they felt so inclined.
And I wouldn't be against repealing abortion. Like, I mean, I would be against it. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I would be against repealing it because there are in cases which the 3 or 4.5% that are survivors of sexual assault in that large pool of problem that we have, they should have the option of that. I shouldn't step in front of that. That's the victim's choice. Now, if the victim also has the choice, if they had that artificial womb thing, and we're getting way off topic in pro-life discussion, we'll go back to real questions here, pertaining to my state. The real question is if we had a perfected technology that allowed people to come to maturity, because from a scientific standpoint, this is what informs my pro-life ideal, is the second cell division starts, that's life. From a scientific standpoint, that's where I see it. Now, if we could take that cell division and put it into something that can carry it to term and make sure that it's a human life saved, totally okay with that. I don't have some kind of like nuanced stance on it. I want to have my argument heard, but I don't want to silence yours. And I really, really appreciate that you're willing to voice your concerns on this, because I'm listening to it.
Well, so I have an older sister. We're half siblings. We have different dads, same mom. My mom had considered aborting her. my mom had considered aborting her, right? And when my sister found this out when she was older, that was pretty, emotional. And she's like, I wouldn't have existed if she had done that, right? And then I'm like, well, that's my sister. She wouldn't have existed if my mom did that, and I was like, okay, I get this. I understand this. And I remember back in college, I wrote a paper about like, I'm okay with abortion if it's early and if it's for certain reasons, and I think I mentioned quality of life because I think that should be part of the equation. We talk about the American scorecard. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah,
You know
no,
what
I'm actually I voted Yang in my primary. I can so
Oh.
I'm swingable if it's logical. That's what I'm for. It's just that a lot of his values, I was a bit confused when I first came across him. Was they were a lot, from my perspective, a lot of them were like center right, and that's why a lot of the left was decrying him as center right when he was actually just so center. He was wild card. Nobody could figure out what to do with him. So it's kind of like a good thing that he came along and he broke the middle ground silence. And sorry, I interrupted you first. You I was just like, for me, it was kind of a wake up call, because what got me involved into wanting to run was as like I got upset, I got radicalized, like with the anger, and I've took a couple months off from the internet. I went into the woods, situations like that where I was just like, I need to get away from it all. And I came to the realization that I'm still somebody who holds conservative values, but the needle is moved more towards I need to be direct with those instead of I need to allow convoluted roundabout ways of having it done. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is all good that we're even talking about it. It's good that Yang helped unite a lot of people. And open the doors to conversations about stories about how things actually affect people. And I was in a women's shelter actually just like 6 or 7 months ago. So like, I mean, it's hell there, and it's a wake up call, but it's definitely not a safe haven that is helpful to getting people back on their feet while keeping their mental health in check. Because like, I mean, I met some gals who were in the women's shelter with me who during COVID ended up getting hotel rooms because they didn't want them all in the same room, right? Well, that's
which
smart.
which is where the benefit of having a 3D printed housing community that can be put up in a week, almost like faster than most FEMA shelters can be put up, honestly.
FEMA shelters are terrible too. I've heard terrible things about them.
Yeah. Who?
Yeah. So I was just saying, getting back to your point about like talking to each other, I think that this is awesome because we're not characterizing the other side into like a meme or a cartoon or like this idea we have up in our head, but we never really and then we just label everybody on the other side of us as this cartoon or this meme or this idea we have in our head. And I think that's what creates the toxicity. So this is only the beginning of this. Now we're not going to have that anymore. We can actually talk to each other instead of having images about each other in our heads that we react to.
Yeah, to that point, I just want to just reiterate, when I talk about language, I'm strictly speaking strategically, because it's such a difficult task we have on how to communicate with each other and let each other know that we actually are allies. We actually, our interests align in more ways than they don't. And we really need to be working together to get a few key changes, systemic changes made. And then if we have further disagreements, we'll be empowered by the changes we've already made to have the discussion about those, but we're not there yet. So when I talk about like language, I just, so much of the challenge of the show, I think, so much of the challenge of what we figured out on the show of what we have to do is find the right language for conservative and liberal, progressive UBI advocates to all talk to each other and come to an agreement. So yeah, thank you.
It's like finding language that is in the middle. You can I mean, I've been diving deep into the English language. The thing is, we all speak English, but it's not the same language. You have people talking in pop culture, you have people talking in movie references. You might not even catch that they just dropped one, right? Like, I've actually had to tell people, like, hey, I need you to let me know when you're quoting something because I'm lost. And it's just like, what, I'm not tapped into pop culture as much as some people, and so it's even just asking people's definitions, like if you're talking about socialism, are you talking about the same thing? Did you define the terms that you're both like? It's language about that, and then it's
Yeah.
asking, can I even enter that can I enter that gate of even talking about this? Are you consenting to talk about socialism? Because then maybe you're easily fired up and this person's ready, or ready to battle. No, you have to ask if people are okay with it,
It's
in my opinion.
yeah, like from my end, like my pillar, my side of the aisle at least. When someone screams that socialism at me, again, I'm like, well, we're already kind of doing that. When we're doing it worse, like we should, if we're gonna do it efficiently in the day and age we're in now, we should, and then we should have this conversation. And I think it was John Jay that said this in the Federalist Papers, but it's like if if the truth offends, then I'd rather be offensive all the time than none of it. Like something around those lines. I'm paraphrasing, but uh, we should be looking at the ability to take critical thought and not be reductionist about it, and then apply it to a theoretical solution, which UBI is. It's still theoretical, but it's never been tried out of a sample size. I think it was like 2,000. It's never been done, and we just had somebody from uh, a country in South Africa. Was it Kenya? Is that what the country, or
Yeah, I think Kenya was the one you're probably thinking about.
they just said we're doing a UBI, and I think they actually use our dollar, if I'm not mistaken. There's also with the whole language barrier you're talking about. The U.S. has a remarkable amount of pidgin languages, which are just amalgamations of French Creole, Southern slang, West Coast slang, and anywhere in between. And you can see the ripple effect from like the coastline inland is that people on the inner portion of it don't catch up the lingo until about 2 years later. So
Through all the
Well, I mean,
movies.
I'm hanging out with people who use language that I find kind of vulgar, right? But
yeah,
they're some of the happiest go lucky people, and they don't necessarily mean it derogatory or offensive. And I mean, I call them out on some of their shit. Like, I'm like not down for some of the things they say, but like it's more of like, tell me more. Why is this the thing you believe? Because like uh I don't understand your thought processes. But I think a lot of the things, we don't educate each other on the information that we have found in this world either, right?
Yeah.
We're all individual pairs of eyeballs, like with perspectives that finally
and
can
ear holes.
brain
Yeah.
is a squishy vat.
Right. And you know what I think would be great if we can concentrate less on people that tend to be so polarizing, like Trump and Sanders, Clinton, McConnell, and all that stuff, and focus more on policies and ideas instead of people. What did Roosevelt say? Like, small minds think about people, bigger minds think about events, and even like the best minds think about ideas. So I think that'll really get us out of here, because like Trump just takes up so much real estate in people's minds and he instantly polarizes people. But then if we just say, let's not talk about his name, let's talk about these ideas and these policies and the like what effects these policies had, we'd be in a much better place.
I'll come out and say it because I know it's a polarizing issue. If we're gonna talk about hard subjects, I'm actually for the wall, but not under the stance that like it's bigoted or anything like that. We bleed hundreds of billions a year in just deportations and hiring officers to patrol the border. If we were to actually just divest from that as well, just like I'm proposing for homelessness in my state. We just end it all, just one
Right.
campaign to get it done, and then we sell them. Come to the port of entry for asylum. Well, we already take in half of the world's refugees every year. You know,
Yeah.
like
And not to mention, like, if a UBI is a right of citizenship, it'll be
legal
more of an
citizenship. Yeah.
right, like legal citizenship. Then they like, if everybody just wants to come here illegally, it's like, hey, you're not going to get it. You're and by that,
It
so
diverts it.
it'll be more of an incentive for people to come in the right way.
And
Yeah.
my reasoning behind wanting to do a stateside UBI before a federal UBI is that if you get, and the federal government usually toes the line with the states. If there's a poor state that's offering a UBI, it'll incentivize people to move back and it'll grow the economy. It's the same thing with a dying town. It's the macro and micro equivalence is fairly similar. So it's almost one in one as far as their interconnection, because the cities do get people pay the taxes pay the state pays the people back in their well-being. So if we have a dying state like Kentucky, like Pennsylvania, like Florida, like all these deficit spending cities with not either too many people not paying in taxes or not enough paying, not enough moving in and producing product, which is GDP. It is a measurement we have to account for, but it's not what should determine what goes on in the state.
So I think we're at time here.
Oh, sorry.
But I know it's all good. I do want to squeeze one more question out of you, man.
Nothing to apologize for.
Yeah. So it's been a while since I've been to Pennsylvania, but I do recall when I was there, you guys had like really weird liquor laws, and I'm just curious where you fall on that argument.
We need to restructure. The Fair Tax Act has been sitting on congressional and Senate floor for like almost 12 plus years. We need to unify all the taxes for the entire federal system, get it so everyone's paying the same, and then do away with all these dog-eared investments and everything. And part of the reason why we have some of those labor laws is because fairly isolationist.
I think I might have broke up when I was speaking. I said your liquor laws. So like if you want to get alcohol in Pennsylvania, sometimes you really got to go like to some crazy links to track it down and obtain it.
I don't drink that much, so I wouldn't personally.
I know they have state-run liquor stores in Pennsylvania. As a New Yorker, I'm in the tri-state area. I'm not in the city, so close enough to Pennsylvania. And they do have very restrictive, I believe, complete state-owned control of the liquor industry. Yeah, that's
more or less. It's kind of like what Oregon has, where they say you can only be open from these hours to these hours, and then after that we just close. So a lot of people from PA either cross state borders to get cheaper liquor and cigarettes, and then they bring them back over, which is illegal, which causes even more problems, because now you're taking the state's income that you've worked off of somebody from, let's say, their employment, and now you're taking that income and putting it in a different state's tax system, and it's divided at the state lines, so it causes an inflation problem for the state that's very restrictive. It's more proof of this is Chicago has the highest gun violence and the most restrictive gun laws.
You sound like the kind of person who should be in government.
So
you do seem to have critical
I'm scared.
thinking.
I'll be honest. I'm scared shitless. I really.
That's a good sign.
Shitless of the proposition.
I think that means you're doing it correctly. It's a scary thing to do.
Like,
it's a scary
really,
thing to do if you're doing it right.
Yeah, because there's so many people who are doing it wrong, and they're afraid that they're intimidated by the people who want to do it right. So they tend to silence them and intimidate them. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
It's going to take just enough people to have an I am Spartacus moment, and just normal people run. I'm blue collar, and I'm going to close with this statement so it wraps it all up. I'm a blue collar worker who believes the taxpayers should get their monthly tax return. Okay. We pay too much into the welfare state in our state. We pay too often, and we're getting proposed more tax hikes. That's not okay. Fiscally conservative ideals should align with UBI. And if you're a Republican or a Republican libertarian leaning person in our state, because I know that's very heavy in our state, You need to stand up and run for office. And if you're a Democrat that can work with Republicans within our state because you're too afraid to speak up, you need to run for office. We're custodians of our own system, and we need to make sure it's taken care of.
Yeah. It's
That's
like,
it. That's all I'm going to say.
that's awesome. I
we
could-
have. Sorry, go on, Ariel.
that, like, I could just imagine that it would work in a Southern accent too. I'm a blue collar worker. We pay too much in taxes, and we need to see some of that money back because it's not coming. We got to be custodian. We got to be doing our
Oh
own
my
thing.
gosh.
We can't let these people wasting our money.
You know,
It would work, but
Right.
it was for fun. I just have.
all right, man.
Uh,
So, God, what the fuck was I
levity.
even-
Gotta have a laugh if it's true,
I was gonna say we have a regular speaker, Jacqueline Holman, is in her mid 50s. She's a welfare recipient from Erie, Pennsylvania. She's like a former Communist Party member. No, she's I'm not sure what party she's in. Maybe Democrat for strategic reasons. I think like the rest of us. But I would love to have you back on sometime to talk to her because you both had firsthand
yeah.
experience with Pennsylvania's welfare system. And you could do a great episode with just the two of you. So maybe sometime we could work that out. But Morgan Dawd, you definitely have my support. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I
Yeah.
Where
appreciate
do
it.
people find more information about?
Yeah.
I don't even have a website yet. I'm actually trying to recruit volunteers and phone bakers and everything. We're trying to set up similar to a pack, not so much because we're going to be taking people from both aisles. We don't know what to do at the moment. We're in the framework of building that, but if you guys want to contact me, you can get me at DGN Morgan, all caps, and then only caps on Morgan for the first letter. And you can just contact me and DM me there. My DMs are open. So if you want to actually help out or people in PA that can get, involved, I'd appreciate it. It's just difficult right now because I'm running privately. I don't even have myself on the ballot officially. I'm going to start doing that around 2024. I'm just trying to get the long-term plan and the vertical integration to get that machine going the second I hit my.
Stay in touch with us. We'll do whatever we can to help you out there. So
Thank you very much.
try to figure it out together. Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys have a great day. I mean,
You too. Great meeting
Yeah,
you.
you too.
We'll be in touch.
all right.
great.
Bye-bye.
That was great. That was great. Thank you guys for watching. Everybody who's watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with more UBI advocacy. So be good to each other.
Bye.
All right.
Bye bye.